Hi, guys. Cecile Edwards here of the Mommy Matters podcast. I have to tell you, if you have not heard about Anchor, it is the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. And Anchor will distribute your podcast for you. So it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. Did I tell you that you can also make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership? It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So download your Anchor app or go to Anchor FM, anchor.fm to get started. You will not be dissatisfied.
Welcome to the Mommy Matters podcast, where Mommy Matters is a double entendre that states and declares that mommies matter, where we have conversations surrounding mommy matters, from conception to pregnancy to postpartum, mother and father wounds, dating, mindfulness and self-care, spirituality, parenting, discipline, legislation, money, and so much more. It is my hope and my prayer that the information that you gather here serves as a blueprint for generational and individual ascension. Enjoy. Welcome to the Mommy Matters podcast, where we discuss all things mommy. And today we have a special guest, and I'm so excited to have Miss Denise Bowles of Doula on the call with us to discuss saving Black mothers and the dismal birth rates for Black mothers. Not just the birth rates of children being delivered, but the deaths that are occurring among Black women is 4 times higher than the average of white women. And so that is a critical thing that I think that we need to discuss, because as we know, it's not just about the fact that Black women are dying. It's the fact that the birthing world and system is not equal and is not giving. I think that if it's not giving one person everything, then it's not giving everyone everything that they deserve and desire. So we're going to be talking about that today. So I want to introduce Miss Denise Bowles to talk a little bit about herself, introduce herself, and give us some information about her business and what she does.
Well, thank you, Cecile. It's really an honor and a delight to be here today to talk about a topic that is very near and dear and passionate for me in the work that I do. I am Denise Bowles. I'm also known as Bold Doula. I am a certified birth doula with Donor International, and I've been a certified birth doula since 2014. I have 86 births of experience, and I do a myriad of things around birth. I do a lot of birth justice work, birth education, inequality awareness. I do a lot of advocacy work around birth. And I also do, as part of my work, I do placenta encapsulation and labor support and lactation coaching. So I really am very entrenched in what I do. I'm one of the leaders in DONA, where I volunteer my time as a regional director for the Northeast for 12 states of doulas. And I'm also a blogger, The Audacious Black Woman, and I'm an author of several books empowering single Black moms. So I do a lot of great things, and I'm really very fortunate that I've been allowed to do these great things because they're very, very, very near and dear to me.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your work. It's so important. And I'm so happy that women like yourself are stepping back into our roles as the ones who were at the forefront of birth work, right? That's how it was for thousands of years. And then, the current system of um, birthing that is predominantly male centered in terms of the doctors that deliver, et cetera. came into being. And now we see that the tides are turning, and I am ecstatic about that. And I'm ecstatic that yourself, you are one of the people at the forefront. So let's jump right in and let's talk about the statistics. I gave the statistic that I heard on a video that I watched just last week. So, what are the statistics on Black mother mortality rates in birthing, and what is the story behind the numbers, right? Because there's always you have statistics, and then you have a story behind the statistics. So, in your expertise, yes.
Yeah, the statistics, it's great for evidence, it's great for a project or a program. But what we have to understand is that the evidence itself is slightly skewed.
Mm,
And those numbers that we have are of what's reported. We
mm-hmm.
don't get all of what's not reported, of course. So there's a whole black hole out there of incidences and losses that have not been properly documented and reported.
Yes.
So, when we talk about numbers, it's like, yeah, that's great, that you can spew off those statistics, but as far as I'm concerned, those statistics are changing every day. So to me, the statistics that we think we know, they're outdated, and they're not precise. So what I know is, I know that Black women have, and on top of the statistics that they have of being 3 to 4 times more likely to have a negative birth experience, I'm going to put an additional 12% on that.
Mm,
That there's an additional 12% that they're going to have a very challenging outcome when it comes to birthing and their babies too. So these statistics are, for me, exponential in nature, because it's just not that one isolated incident, but it branches out, it bleeds out, into the Black woman's family,
mm-hmm.
into her reproductive health history, because now with this birth trauma, she now has the propensity of having a negative outcome on the next birth, or not even, maybe not even being able to conceive at all.
Mm,
So we have to think about those impacts when we talk about trauma and the Black woman when it comes to childbirth, because it is an exponential factor. It's just not a isolated, oh, one and done thing. It really, really bleeds out into that woman's family, the generations, her community, everything. It's basically a domino effect.
right. It's trauma, right? And I was reading somewhere where you were just saying about the adding of the 12% in birthing numbers. We often don't think about for example, women who um, you know, may have the outskirts of the statistics. So, the mortality rates are talking about specific reporting of the women who have died. There may be women who, became very ill, et cetera, as well through their process. And as you said, it's the trauma afterwards as well. The trauma with, I've had my own experience as well. There's a certain fear that you have about the process of even just going to the hospital and seeing doctors, et cetera, that carries with you through your experiences. And we've seen recently, for example, women like Venus, was it Venus or Serena Williams that just had a baby? I don't even know the difference in their names, but she talked about her experience. And this is a woman who has, financial support. So, think about that when you're talking about statistics as well. When the women that are speaking out are going to be the women that feel empowered to do so. And what about the women who don't feel empowered to do so when you're talking about birthing and those things, or the families that don't feel empowered to do so? So, how can we educate ourselves as women? What kinds of education can we have about these realities, and what can we do to advocate for ourselves in the birthing process, to understand our bodies better before even getting to that process?
Yeah, it's a great question. I really do believe that Black women can embrace moving away from the capitalistic side of birth and
Mm,
moving towards the work of birth. There is work to be done when you are pregnant. It is not just a matter of believing what the system wants you to believe, of just allowing your body to go ahead and be pregnant and nurture this baby and have a baby. There is work that women need to do when they're pregnant. Getting a good support team, getting a great support community, moving forward with their nutrition, understanding what their lab results are, and how they can be proactive in that, as well as looking into the type of provider that they want to have as part of their birth team, and the institution that they're going to choose to give birth at, whether it's a freestanding birth center or hospital, or even having a home birth. um, these are the things that Black women, I'm suggesting that they look into, instead of looking into what the latest celebrities stroller looks like, or having a baby shower, or I want this birth photography session, this maternity shoot. These type of things are really distracting our women of color from the importance of doing the work in birth. Because we live in very urban communities, because we're no longer nomadic, tribal people, we've moved away from a lot of our old customs, and our bodies have shifted in the result of this. So it's really, really important to have those proactive actions in place, to have that pelvic floor therapist work with that woman while she's pregnant and afterwards, to have those comfort techniques in place even before she goes into labor: meditation, deep breathing, acupressure, massage, aromatherapy. All these things are really part of the work of birth. And unfortunately, our Black women are very, very, very distracted between racism and capitalism. And it becomes very, very challenging to do this work that a lot of other ethnicities and cultures have no problem doing. And it's a deficit when I have to stand there and spend an hour convincing a Black woman on why she needs a doula, and why it's the cost is such a great investment for her. So that's where I see this. The Black women really have to do the work in birth.
Right. And this goes back to my premise personally of self care, understanding what that really entails. Right. So a lot of us think of self care as the topical things, getting our hair and nails done, et cetera, et cetera. However, we have all these triggers that we have yet to heal, or we have all these blank slates of knowledge about ourselves and our families, or about our bodies, or about what is out there that we can do. And when you consider it, as you were saying, looking at what celebrities are doing, you may see the outward of what celebrities are doing, but please believe that they have pelvic floor specialists and doulas and midwives, and they have all of those things too. So, if you really want to do the research, you need to go deep into the research and think beyond just, the outward, the physical. And it is up to us to make that advocacy point anyway. We cannot wait for others to say to us, this is what we should do. We have to be more proactive, as you said. And I totally understand, and I agree with that full-fledged, wholeheartedly. So this just brings me to the question then, because I get the question all the time when I'm talking to women in general. What is a doula and midwife? And what is the difference between a doula and midwife? And how do they assist women in their birthing processes or after birth?
Well, that's a very good question, and I've actually written a blog about that on
Okay.
my webpage, where I actually break down the differences between the OB, the midwife, the doula, and the childbirth educator. Because a
Excellent.
lot of times, as a doula, those four things, or those four principles, tend to get blurred, and
Mm,
people feel that they could forego one for the other or substitute one for the other, and that's just not how it works. So, for me, in my training and my level of exposure and experience in this, an obstetrician is a medical trained expert on the different diseases and detriments in pregnancy.
okay.
So the obstetrician is really there to solve these really serious problems that can come up in pregnancy, whether it's preeclampsia, whether it's a tumor, whether it's diabetes, gestational diabetes, whether any other diseases or problems, and diseases or problems with the mom and the fetus, so that they can make that referral to a neonatologist or any other type of specialist. Now, if you need that kind of service, of course, it's great to have that expert there. And therefore, keep in mind that that expert has a much more clinical mind and wants things done under a very structured clinical model.
Right.
So then, if you go to a midwife is trained for the holistic reproductive health and well-being of the woman. So it's not just pregnancy; it's her whole health. But she does specialize in pregnancy and childbirth. She's there to give you, your nutrition support, your mental health support. She's there to guide you and help you to do this work that I just spoke about, so that you can really develop a great support team with your birth. She does have clinical training in how to birth and how to help a woman labor. And she is also trained in some of the medical complications that could happen. And if it's out of her scope of practice, then she pulls in an obstetrician. Now, doula is a person who is providing the advocacy, education, and comfort of that laboring person and their family. During the pregnancy, they're doing education and advocacy. During the birth, they're doing comfort techniques, education, advocacy, and postpartum, they're doing education, advocacy, and support. It's non-clinical, so doulas are non-clinical entities. We are not there to do vaginal exams, blood pressure checks, anything like that. That is simply a non-clinical entity that is beyond our scope of practice. However, we can incorporate aromatherapy, acupressure, massage therapy. Um, we can incorporate positions, yoga positions. We can do those comfort techniques to help that person labor and have a birth experience that allows them to work with their bodies. A lot of doulas are certified through a certifying body where they have policies and they agree to a code of ethics. And then there are doulas out there who feel they don't need to do that. And that's up to the family to decide if they want someone who is trained and certified as opposed to someone who is not. And that's a personal preference. The childbirth educator really goes in and teaches about the different stages of labor and the actual different stages and trimesters of pregnancy, along with anatomy and comfort techniques as well. And it's really unfair to substitute childbirth education for a doula, which I encounter a lot. A lot of clients say, "Oh, I have a doula. I have you as a doula, Denise. I don't need childbirth education." And I always steer them to childbirth education as well, because the more education you have, the more comfortable you will feel. So
Right.
I don't feel that there's to be any substitution or blurring of the lines here of one over the other. A lot of times people say, "Oh, a midwife doesn't know what an obstetrician knows." And that's not true. They just have a different level of education. But
Mm-hmm.
many, many, many midwives are known and have been renowned in training obstetricians through med school and through their residency practices. So it's really important that everyone understands the different levels of what it is that they're looking for, and that one is more clinical than the other, one is more holistic than the other. None of these are to replace anyone, and that they all could be part of a great team. So that if you were to go to a prenatal care practice that has both obstetricians and midwives in the group, that's a great blend, because you get exposed to both practices. And when you go into labor, you can either have an obstetrician on call or a midwife. That's great. And therefore, you've taken your childbirth ed class and you come in with your doula. You're set. You're good. So it's really important that the work is done in understanding what the roles and boundaries are of these four entities, because they're all part of a great team. And when they work well together, you have a really, really awesome birth experience. And I've experienced it, and it's really wonderful. I've worked with some awesome obstetricians and midwives and childbirth educators who are so dedicated on working together as a team, and where the ego is not present, then
Mm-hmm.
we have a great experience.
Yes, absolutely. And because at the end of the day, it is about having a great birth experience for the mother and bringing the child into a supportive environment for the family. So it's very important. And I'm working with a family who I'm their postpartum helper, doula, or however you want to describe that, and they have all of these people on their team. So I'm just one part of the team. So I get the ability to see how all of it works as well is so very important. And I'm glad that you gave that information, and I hope everyone goes to your website to go, which you'll give that web address shortly, to look at that article and really have that and use that as a tool to educate yourself, to educate. And it doesn't even matter if you already have children, if you don't have children, even if you don't want to have children, somebody that you know is going to give birth at some point. Right?
That's right.
And
That's right.
so it's okay that the community is educated about this.
That's
It is
right.
men, it's very important that daddy understands, or the brother or the father understands these very important facts, because again, this is about saving Black mothers, not just from death in childbirth, but from having to go through what I think a lot of us experience, which is a feeling of not being supported and loneliness in our raising of children.
Well,
And
I don't like to, if I could interject for a minute,
mhm,
Cecilia, I don't like to say the word saving, because our
okay,
Black women don't need to be saved. Our Black
mm,
women need to be empowered. Our Black
empowered.
women
Mm,
need to be uh, brought to the table where we can have these conversations where they become a form of a norm, where we're
mhm,
having, as you just said, where everybody, even if I'm not having a baby, yeah, I know, oh yeah, you can go over here, and they have this in the community, where it's a normal culture of conversation when it comes to birth. And why is this so important? It's not just about the woman, it's about the generation.
mhm,
And when you impact a generation and you decimate them through one negative birth after the next, our children, our progeny becomes weaker and weaker and weaker. And
mhm.
I do truly believe with all that I am, that in doing the work I do as a doula, I am actually empowering and bringing, reemerging the Black generations, the Black family.
You are. You
So
definitely
I
are.
think that's really, really important for people to understand that when you have a negative birth experience, it is exponential and it goes throughout that generation, that lineage. And when you have a positive birth experience, it just enhances that lineage and strengthens it. So I don't want to save the Black woman. I'm here to empower her. I'm here
Absolutely.
to guide her and to be shoulder to shoulder with her so she doesn't feel isolated. And I'm also here to save that space at the table for her so
Hmm.
that she has that platform to be seen, to be heard, to be respected, and to be welcomed.
Thank you for that point of correction. And I totally agree with that. You can't effectively save anyone without empowering them. Otherwise, they're going to be, or you're going to become their crutch, I guess you could say. So that is a well taken point. So I want to talk about, when we're talking about empowering Black mothers, what are some of the blockages that we have to being empowered? We did talk a little bit about that, but some of the things that I think about and I talk about are some of the, for example, old wives' tales or myths around birthing, right? And the things that you need to do in order to have a successful birth. Also, just the lack of education, the miseducation, and the um, miseducation of hospital staff in supporting Black women in birth as well, whether they're, doula, midwife, whatever. So can you talk about what some of those blockages to empowering Black women may be?
Well, the first and foremost is the lack of knowing the history. Granny
Mm-hmm.
midwives came to this country as slaves and basically took a lot of the culture and a lot of the norms and practices from Africa and brought them here and started assisting women, both white and Black, in birthing in this country. And they had a very close culture of community, of engagement, hands-on, frontline, and it was a beautiful experience. Um, and it really sustained this country and this nation when you think about it, because Blacks built the United States of America. So it all came back down to the granny midwives. Now, when Western culture came through and patriarchy really dominated the medical field, it pushed midwives out, and
Mm-hmm.
it then put in a role of patriarchal intimidation and fear.
Mm-hmm.
for those nurses who are predominantly females, for the lay people who are predominantly females, and for the female mother herself. It then became this godlike entity called the medical doctor. And a lot of that was fear and intimidation. So for the Black woman today giving birth, there was still that fear and intimidation where if you don't do this, then we're going to report you. If you don't do this, you can hurt your baby. If you don't do this, then you're not going to have a good pregnancy. If you don't listen to what I say, if you don't do what I say you should do, if you don't be what I think you need to be. So that's one of the barriers right there, is that Black women need to understand their history and understand that they do have autonomy in their birth, and to understand that with that work that we talked about at the beginning of this conversation is an empowerment tool. The other tool that's not here is the conversations. Unfortunately, Black women, if they do have a negative outcome, it's very rare for them to talk it out because they want to just subdue it and forget about it and just push it in the past as far away as possible. We need to hear those stories. We need to keep reiterating those stories and share those stories amongst each other, at the beauty salon, at the nail salon, at the churches with the health ministers, at the sororities, at these gatherings with women, on these Black, women travel trips. We need to keep having these conversations so that they are empowering, and that Black women do not feel isolated when something untoward does happen. So that's another one of those things. The other thing that's really happening too is the capital side of this, the capitalistic side of this, the money side of this. And Black women need to understand that the medical society is building a lot of profit off of Black birth, off of high NICU rates, off of high disease diagnosis during pregnancy with gestational diabetes, hypertension. And we also have to talk about, for Black women, how important it is to have that team, so that there is a situation of domestic violence where a Black woman is encountering domestic violence while she's pregnant. And that's one of the most vulnerable times of her life.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, domestic violence is another deterrent, and it's another barrier that Black women face. We just had something on the news here in New York City this past week where a woman was stabbed 31 times in her torso by her boyfriend because he did not want the baby, and he killed the baby at 25 weeks. She's in critical condition. Not the first time we've heard of any kind of hostile, violent crime against a Black woman or a woman of color, excuse me, and it won't be the last. But we have to bring in their domestic violence issues. And we also have to talk about mental health as well. With the fluctuation of the hormones, it could trigger that bipolarism or that depression or that anxiety. We have to have those conversations and empower that woman so she does not shut down, but she actually feels that there's resources there to support her and to really engage her in her pregnancy. So those are some of the barriers that I see that are happening out here. One of the other ones that are really dominant is the lack of diversity in the actual culture of birth when it comes to care and providers. It's very detrimental when you go into a hospital and all the nursing staff looks one way, but they're serving a diverse group of people. There's something wrong with that manager who's picking a staff of all white people to serve a culture or a group or a community that is very diverse.
Right. I mean, it goes back to what you said about what we know about the system of white supremacy, period. There's this thought that, I am the all-knowing person and God or whatever, and so that these poor people down here, they need my assistance in being able to be a better person or to have a better experience, as opposed to what we should do in all things, whether it's education, birth, or whatever, is to see that person as the expert in themselves and work with that to give them the best outcome and empower them the way that they deserve and desire to be empowered. So I appreciate you giving those points, and they were very powerful and very poignant about the history of birthing and the granny midwives of that came from Africa, but also Native Americans who have very intricate birthing processes and ceremonies that have been lost to to our understanding at this point. I had a client one time who told me that her mother experienced something called this is something apparently, and I went and researched it, where back in the, I want to say 40s, 50s, 60s, women were having babies through a process where it was like a sleep induced, they were induced to sleep or something.
It's called twilight birth, and
Twilight
it was
birth,
very
that's exactly.
predominant to give a woman anesthesia and have her almost be to the point of unconsciousness, and
Mm,
have her birth their baby. She's not aware of what's happening. She's not in tune with her body. She has no memory, no recall. She just wakes up hours later and told that she has a baby, and she doesn't even know what it is. It's a boy or a girl or what. Very disconnected. Oftentimes, these women were tied down as well, and it was completely barbaric.
I'm so, when she told me about it, my body hurt literally, because I could not imagine going through the pain of giving birth, being tied down, and then just kind of waking up and saying, oh, well, here goes your baby. I mean, imagine the disconnect, as you were talking about, the
Yeah.
disconnect of the birthing process, the disconnect to your children that you have when you go through such a process. And then we wonder why we have these issues between, because we know that parenting is not just about the physicality of I gave birth to you. It's an energetic, it's a spiritual thing, right? And so the process of giving birth further enhances that connection. And so that's something that I think that a lot of us need to be aware of and know of what has been done to women in the birthing process. And when it comes to Black women specifically, understanding, I'm currently reading a book called Medical Apartheid, which is a great book that talks about the different ways. There's sections in the book that talks about birthing in particular. And then there's also books that are referenced in there that talk about the specific experiences of Black women giving birth, etc., that you can reference and look through. But all of these things are still a part of our collective memory in the birthing process. And the reason why a lot of times, women, people in general, people of color, Black people in general, do not trust the medical system, right? And so, having, being armed with this information is so critical in order to, again, empower yourself and give yourself the start that you need, but also the start that your children need, to know how to empower themselves, and that they always have the power to do what it is that they desire to have done. Right. Another thing that you said was about the finances in birthing. And I remember when I was pregnant, this was years ago, my doctor wanted me to come in all the time because she was convinced that I had to have gestational diabetes. And I'm like, this woman, what is this woman talking about? you know? And I was like, I don't have diabetes. If I had something was not well with me, I would know, and I would let you know. And so I connected what you said about that to my own personal experience, and I'm pretty sure that the women listening, or families listening, can connect to that as well. um, so in your opinion, this is something that I talk about, but when should young people start to be educated around birthing experience, having babies, and how do we broach that conversation? Like, when does this conversation start with young people?
Well, it starts from the home. So if that family's on board, and if there's multiple children and they've witnessed their mother giving birth and they've witnessed their mother breastfeeding, then it's part of their nomenclature at this point. They get it. And then they go off to school, and then school is saying, oh, don't show pregnancy videos, don't show birth videos, don't show this, don't show that. So
Mm-hmm.
then the schools now are saying, on a censor line of don't do this, don't do that. But it really starts in the home. Birth is discussed in the Bible. Birth is discussed in religion and religious practices. So we have to understand that birth is all around us. We were all born and here on this earth. We all, went through this experience, and we have to have that conversation with the proper name of the anatomy from a very young age, so that our children understand when someone is trying to touch them inappropriately, so that they understand that their bodies are meant to do a certain thing, whether it's a male that's meant to do or a female, what she's meant to do. So I think the question is how early can you get your
Right.
child to understand the culture of birth, that it's so very normal that
Mm-hmm.
it shouldn't be censored or saying, oh well, I can only start talking to her at this time. You know, it should be a normal part of everyone's life where they're exposed to that, and it should not be a shock. It should not be offensive. It is what we are. We all were born. We all are to be fed. So I say the earlier the better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I totally agree with that. So, what are some, do you know of any policies or large campaigns? I'm in the process of doing some research around this issue. Are there any, do you know anything, for example, by law that is being pushed through Congress or anything like that to shed light to this issue and to really give this issue of empowering mothers in their birthing process a voice?
Well, from the White House level, no. As a matter of fact, in this current presidency that we have, they have banned abortion for rape and incest victims. The woman is now expected to carry that child to term.
Mm,
They have banned and done so many other things against reproductive health that is absolutely shocking.
mm,
Uh, and you know it's coming from the White House. But on a local level, here in the state of New York, our current governor has looked into incorporating the doula practice to be reimbursable through Medicaid.
that's
And you know, it brings up a lot of questions with that because Medicaid is a faulty system within itself.
mm-hmm,
And to expect a doula to work on that client's birth for 30, 40 hours and be paid $400 is an atrocity.
right.
So we have to really ante up the value of what this service is, and they have to really understand what that value is. So yeah, they've got several things in legislature to go forward on this. But I really think it's really up to the insurance companies to lobby and get those codes in place. It's always been such a big mystery of, oh, we haven't assigned a code for childbirth for a doula. It's like it's really not that hard to do.
Right.
And for
Throw
the
the numbers
insurance
out there.
companies to have that as an incentive,
Right.
as part of their preventive management, to have these families embrace this type of resource that would also save them dollars, because everybody knows a high risk birth costs a lot of money, and NICU babies, you know, anywhere from $22 to $35,000 per day. So,
Wow.
you know, it's really, if you want to save money, if you want to change the statistics in your state, there's a very very easy way to do that. But for some reason, they've made this very very complicated,
Mm,
and I know it's a lot of politics behind it. Um, and I know that it's going to come about, but politically, it's going to step on a lot of people's toes, and it's going to stick, you know, their hand in a lot of people's pockets. Because, like I said before, there is profit in a dysfunctional birth and pregnancy. There's profit for somebody in that.
mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I totally hear you. I know that in New Jersey they're doing a pilot of, getting community doulas to postpartum doulas specifically to assist women. Um, but again, this goes back to with many policies, it starts a lot of times from the people and what the people are asking for, right? So, empowering ourselves, educating ourselves, being open to that education is very important. But also being empowered goes to understanding that as women, we really have to go into the thought and the process of taking care of ourselves, reducing our stress levels, really having the mindset of taking care of ourselves and why it's so important for the outcomes, not just birth outcomes, but as you said, future generations and taking care of future generations. So it's very integrated mindset, mentality, and understanding that we have to have. And I'm glad again that more education is out there about this issue. And I know that soon that the legislatively, these things are going to become central because they're going to have to become central. Um, because we cannot continue to lose our women and children like this. So, do you have any final thoughts or words or anything that you have to say about this empowering and saving our Black mothers in general?
Yeah, I would love to see the Black woman do the work that our
Mm-hmm.
ancestors did before us when it comes to childbirth and pregnancy itself. To look into those resources that we had on this wonderful conversation here today and do the work in birth and step away from the capitalistic celebrity following of, you know, having this maternity shoot and this $400 stroller. Focus on what you can do for your family and your future generations. And there's tons of doulas out here. There's so much work to be done that there's no shortage of resources here. Secure a doula. Have your family put together instead of that baby shower. Have them all pool in and get you the resources we talked about here on the show today.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the pelvic floor therapist, the doula. The postpartum support, because the fourth trimester is just as important as the other three trimesters. And really make a concerted vow to change this dynamic. It's up to us. You know, right now, a policyholder can go ahead and throw together a policy, but, you know, if we don't uptake that policy, it's not going to work. It really comes down to individual communities to do this work. I would love to see sororities put more money into scholarships for midwives to go to midwifery school. I would love to see more sororities put in money to their communities so that if a woman wants a doula, it's paid for, it's taken care of. I would love to see that because it does domino into future sorority members, right? So we all are invested in this. It's just how well we make the investment is what really counts. And there's a lot of women out here like myself and you, Cecile, who are so dedicated to doing this work. So if you know of a Black doula group or a Black midwifery group, or if you're near Jenny Joseph down in Orlando, Florida, please donate to her birth center where they're serving these women who are disenfranchised, who wouldn't have access to care. If you can somehow make a donation or make a scholarship fund and send one person through that wonderful gift that you give, we could turn this around. We don't need a policy to turn this around. This is on us to turn around.
Absolutely, I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. We cannot wait for others to come and do the work that we need to do. That's not going to work. We have to release that mentality. I'm glad that you mentioned Jenny Joseph Birth Center. I'm going to look it up now because I'll be in Orlando this summer, and hey, I might as well just go ahead over there and visit and see what I can do, right?
Please go
Yes.
contact her, visit her.
Yes.
She's a phenomenal leader here about, you know, birth justice and maternal health awareness. And this woman has dedicated her life, and she's one of the leaders of Black birth awareness. And there's quite a few of them. And you need to know who these people are. You need to know who Sophia Monroe is. You need to know who Hakima Payne is. You need to know who Claudia Booker is. You need to know who Mars Lord is. There's so many Black women out here from across the pond, from here, from Canada. They're all doing this fantastic work, and we need to know who they are so that we can continue to elevate them and allow them to do this work. So that's all part of the process. It's all part of that quilt that our ancestors did and made, and it's very important.
Absolutely. Thank you for that information and those names and those individuals and these thoughts around sororities. I know some sorority folks that I'm definitely going to be drilling this idea down into. Like, let me tell you. Let me give you an idea of the different things that you possibly do.
Yeah. And it's a domino effect. If you want those kids to get through college and join your sorority, then support them at birth.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh my goodness. I love it. Thank you so much, Denise. Please share your information with everyone. I know you have a blog, you have a podcast, you are an active birth worker and birth advocate. So please share those details with those who are in the Northeast. If in any other consultations, I don't know if you do consultations in any way, but please share any of that information so that we can know how to stay in touch with you.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I serve New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. I also have some clients in North Carolina, believe it or not.
No,
But
that's
if I can't get to you, then I can certainly link you up with an awesome doula who can support and serve you. My name is Denise Bowles. You can find me on www.bolddoula.com. That is my webpage. You could also find me on Facebook under Denise Bowles or Bold Doula or Raising Princes to be Kings. You can find me on LinkedIn and Twitter under Denise Bowles or Bold Doula. You can find me on Blog Talk Radio, where my podcast is of Birth While Black. And you could also just Google Denise Bowles. If you just Google Denise Bowles, you will find everything about me, and you can click on those links and get to me as soon as possible. I do respond to emails and queries very quickly because I know it's important that you reached out to me. So I would love to hear from you.
excellent. Absolutely. I know who I would turn to if I ever, decide to have another child.
Come over to New Jersey in a heartbeat.
Okay, if I make that decision, okay,
Yep.
it's clear. But it has been a pleasure, and thank you for listening to the show of Empowering Black Mothers. I didn't change the name. I said, you know what, it's going to be Empowering Black Mothers instead of Saving Black Mothers.
That's
I know
right.
saving
You
is
don't
safe.
need to be saved. The white man tried to for 400 years.
Right, absolutely. Let's get out of that mindset. It is empowering Black mothers, okay? And I am gladly corrected. So thank you so much again, and we look forward to seeing you doing even greater things and being on the forefront of advocacy even more. And thank you so much for your information, and thank you all for listening. Bye-bye. Did you like that? I know it was as informative for you as it was for me. Look, this is a process for all of us. And to keep this process going, I would love to invite you to donate to our podcast. We want to continue to give you high-level content, beautiful content that enlightens and inspires and broadens your vision to elevate you and evolve. So please feel free to go to the podcast page at anchor.fm/Mommy Matters. We would love to hear your questions and comments as well, so that we can discuss them in future podcasts. And you can email that to mommyevolve@gmail.com. You can also visit the website and send your comments there. www.mommyevolve.com. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Peace and love.